I'd like to ask a few questions on the expert panel on the declared fishing activity, small pelagic fishery, Declaration 2012. How much of the approximately $860,000 that's been allocated has actually been spent on research activities?
Thanks, Senator. Paul Murphy, Assistant Secretary, Wildlife, Trade and Biosecurity. From the budget of $880,000,
yep.
Expenditure to date is $161,620.
I think when I last asked, the last estimates was around $109,000. So we've spent a little bit since then, but I'm just interested, considering the reporting deadline's only 6 months away. Do you anticipate you'll spend the rest of that research? Is there something coming up that's going to take up the next 60-70% of the allocation?
It's really a matter for the panel to decide, Senator.
Okay.
So far, they've, apart from the consultations that they've had with experts, they've commissioned 3 reports.
Yep.
And there's more money than that contracted. So I think that the value of the contracts in total that are under contract are $274,000.
274. Okay.
And there's another sort of $30,000 that deals with running the panel itself.
So would you consider then that the original money was an over-allocation of what you needed, considering it was a new territory, or is there still more work that needs to be done by the panel?
Well, the panel still has to write the report and make its own decisions about what further research it might need.
Okay. So the original 880,000, was that estimated by your department? Like, who put that together as the necessary funding for the expert panel to make their deliberations?
I don't know.
We understand it was the department. Sorry, it was before we became involved in the program.
I beg your pardon?
We understand it was the department. Yes. Yes.
The department, but who in the department? And
my staff in the relevant division at the time provided advice to the Minister of approximately what we believe might be necessary, right, based on our understanding of the costs of fisheries research and other matters, and then the government made an appropriate decision at the time. Okay, so how could you give us an update on the progress? So there's 3 reports that have been written, but considering this came up fairly quickly, are you confident that you've got the necessary funds in place and the expertise to make the declaration on the fishing activity? So
far, Senator, the panel's considered the substantive submissions that were received through the consultation on the declarations. They've invited authors of those submissions to suggest additional experts from whom the panel could seek further advice.
Right.
They've undertaken face-to-face interviews with key experts.
Yep.
They've considered all the written submissions, and they've commissioned 2 literature reviews and a technical review to inform their assessment.
So would it be fair to say there hasn't been any studies done in the field, like DEPM egg studies or anything like that, that's been required by the panel? The stock assessments, just as one example. So
the stock assessments and sort of the egg production model that you refer to, those sort of things will be done by the fisheries management rather than the panel. So the panel's looking at its terms of reference, especially in regards to the impacts on protected species and localised depletion caused by the activities of such a vessel.
Okay, so you anticipate you'll be able to report in time by October that you'll have your work completed?
The panel's advice to us is they're planning on submitting the report by the due date, which is the 22nd of October.
But at this stage you can confirm that you're only allocating roughly 300,000, 274 plus the 30 of the original 880?
No, I don't think that's what the officer said.
Sorry, that's the way I interpret it. You said you'd had contracts in place.
That's right, and the panel is still operating, so it's open to the panel to commission or undertake further work in the period that's available to them.
So is that period till October?
That's when they're scheduled to deliver their first report to the Minister, yes.
So the money doesn't need to be spent by October?
Well, there are 2 declarations, both of which have different dates of
One was the
expiry.
transshipment, is that correct?
That's correct. The
Right,
second
yep.
declaration relates to transshipment.
Okay, so you'll be spending the other allocation on looking at transshipment.
Well, you're asking us to conject ourselves into a future that hasn't yet occurred. So I think we've
A
answered
future
the
that
question.
hasn't yet occurred. This is
I think we've answered the question as
to
best we can, which is that we've allocated a certain proportion. We have an intention to allocate a certain other proportion in the not-too-distant future, and it remains open to the panel to allocate further resources to further studies during the period that they operate.
So what period will they operate? When will they wind up? Has that been decided, or is it ongoing?
So there are two declarations. The
Yep.
first expires in October, the second one, February?
The second declaration expires in April 2015.
Okay.
But a panel to conduct the review under that declaration has not yet been established.
Senator Whish-Wilson, speaking of winding up.
Okay, yeah, so if I could just finish on that last point, Chair. So you haven't had a panel in place. So where did you get this idea that you needed the extra funding for a panel you haven't put in place yet? In terms of, unless you say what you spent already is sufficient for the first declaration.
So I'm sorry, Senator, we do have a panel in place for the first declaration.
For the second
panel's-
declaration I asked, you said you just said, sorry, sir, that you haven't got the panel in place for the second declaration yet.
That's right. There hasn't been a panel established for the second declaration yet, but there is potential for the funding
Right.
to be used by that panel.
Potential for the funding, but it's something you haven't considered yet.
Well, we're
It's
guided really
something-
by the panel to
Yeah.
establish their
Okay,
priorities.
okay, look, the line of my question is obviously pretty obvious. I want to know if you spend all the money, if that's what you needed for resources. It's a pretty important thing you're doing. And obviously, having asked 3 months ago, you've only spent 100,000 out of the 880 that was allocated, and now you've spent 161 with only 6 months to go.
Senator Whish-Wilson.
So we're getting bang for our buck.
Senator, we're guided, as I said, we're guided by the expert panel about what they think we should be spending the money on, what research should be commissioned. So
Okay.
it's not a decision for us to go out and commission research to allocate and spend all of the funding. If the panel is confident that they can make considered expert independent advice to the government based on the research that they've commissioned to date, and it costs less than $880,000, then that's...
So be it. Yeah.
Senator Whish-Wilson, any